Welcome on into another edition of Wager Talk Extra, a little midweek pick-me-up for you, the viewers. I'm your host, Dan Alexander, and another terrific edition that we have. We're going to be talking some UFC right here at the top with the prop master himself, Andy Lang, and then Nick Borrman joining us. He'll get to do a little victory lap on a head-to-head. They didn't make it a bet, but there was some disagreement maybe on a golfer. We'll talk to Nick about that coming up here on the PGA segment. And then Kevin Dolan going to shut it down with a little rugby talk and boxing talk. You say, how do all these things go together? Well, that's what Wager Talk Extra is all about. We're here to remind you that no matter what you're cashing on, no matter what you're betting, as long as you get the ticket home, that's going to be able to spend all the same. So let's get right into it. Andy Lang joining us. And man, we've introduced a new segment that you and I just absolutely love that we call Will There Be Blood? And we have a little sound drop for you coming up, but we've been keeping a tally. And I think, Andy, we may need to reach out to, any sportsbook operators and see if this can now be a prop. Will there be blood? And we can maybe partner with them, because if people have been riding with There Will Be Blood, Andy,
I want your blood. I want your soul.
we are now 2-1
right
on
now.
Will There Be Blood or Not. So before we get into this week's fight that we have for we have quite literal proof. Correct me if I'm wrong. There was some bloodiness that we saw in the octagon last weekend.
Oh, couldn't have gone any better. Julian Marquez and Marc-Andre Barriault, and it was exactly like we thought. Barriault pushes Marquez up against the cage and lands a million dirty boxing shots, uppercuts, elbows. I mean, you got Barriault there with cuts on his head. You got Marquez whose face is mashed in. This one was never in doubt. So when we're talking about this, There Will Be Blood, we expect violence, and that means we like the unders or the fight to not go the distance. So we can have some fun with it, but we can also make money off of this as well.
Yeah, now 2-1 on the There Will Be Blood plays. And as Andy said, it kind of just started off with me and Andy being like, oh my God, our graphics director, Will, is the absolute GOAT with what he worked up for you in There Will Be Blood. But as Andy said, we will be a little bit more forward in sharing, hey, in this There Will Be Blood segment, we're talking about fights that more than likely are not going to go the distance, and it's worth a sprinkle looking that way. So this week, we want to talk a little Ramos and Lingo, and why, Andy, do we think there might be some blood in this one?
Well, you've got two guys that really like to stand and bang. So this matchup just is a stylistic beauty for There Will Be Blood. So what I like about Ramos and Lingo is you're not going to see hardly any takedowns, if any. Ramos has really looked impressive in his last few fights. He throws a lot of spinning elbows and spinning back fists and spinning kicks, but they're planned. He practices them. You see him a lot. Other guys throw them and they miss completely. Ramos is good at these, and he actually knocked out Danny Chavez in his last fight with a spinning back elbow. Austin Lingo, he will stand and bang with the best of them. He's tough, almost probably too tough. He got bloodied up against Saldana, and Saldana just got tired. But they stood and went toe-to-toe in the middle of the ring. Ramos had a fight that he lost against Tszyu in his 2 fights ago, and it was just a war. They went toe-to-toe in the middle of the ring. He lost it, but it was one of those where you walked away and you were like, wow, both those guys are really good. Ramos and Lingo are going to absolutely stand toe-to-toe. There's not going to be any takedowns. You're going to see tons of headshots, and don't be surprised if one shot in particular lands big. I would expect it to come from Ramos with his creative strikes. But these guys are way tougher than your average guy. So expect a lot of violence in this one. I don't expect this to go the distance, but I do expect to see blood in this one.
There will be blood in Ramos and Lingo. Hop below in the comments and let you know any fight that you think might be seeing some banging on the side of the cage there that you might want to add in your own edition of There Will Be Blood. Check out Andy Lang at WagerTalk.com. We'll mention what you can find over there at that page, but we just want to keep on rolling here with another decent card in UFC action. So Andy has a fight to watch, and he thinks we just might have a barking dog in this one. What are we looking at, Andy?
Well, we're looking at the Alexanders. The Alexanders, the great fight here. You got Volkov versus Romanov, so two big guys. And Romanov is the favorite, and I get it, but I see some holes in Romanov's game right now, and I think Volkov. The key for Volkov is, can he survive the first round? So this is what happened in the last fight: Romanov versus Tszyu. Romanov dominates the first round. Probably should have been a 10-8. It's not a 10-8, and what happens? Romanov has questionable at best cardio. Tszyu wins the next 2 rounds with some stand up, and he hands Romanov his first loss in the UFC. I think Volkov can do the same. I think Volkov can stifle Romanov a little bit. I expect Romanov to get this on the ground. But if Volkov survives that first round, don't be surprised if Volkov pulls ahead in rounds 2 and 3. I mean, Volkov knocked out Rosenstrike in his last fight. He has a win against Tszyu, who just beat Romanov. His last 2 losses were against Tom Aspinall, who I have ranked way higher over Romanov, and Cyril Gahn, but that was a decision. And Gahn has good cardio. Those guys went 5 rounds. So for me, this is a question about, can Romanov get the finish early? Because if he doesn't, I think Volkov is going to be able to tee off on him as we see the cardio quickly get away from Romanov. So if you're betting Romanov, I would bet him to do this in the first round or under 1.5 rounds. But if you like Volkov, look for him to win by decision or maybe a late finish. But definitely good value on the dog in this one.
And here I just thought you brought up the all Alexander affair for the host, Dan Alexander here. But Andy actually had an angle here for you. Andy at wt.buzz/AL. I mean, they can take their pick on what they want to ride with. That's why I highly suggest just getting all access for Andy. But as far as the MMA side of thing goes, number 1 in MMA profits this season. Very proud of that, I'm sure. And I think you have one of your top-rated plays, a 4%er that you have locked and loaded for this weekend's card already, correct?
Yeah, 4% play. That is up. We've been really, really good on these best bets. We're number 1 in 2023. We're on a 15-6 run overall in MMA. Dan, you know as well as I do, if I can keep up that kind of winning percentage, won't be working very long for much longer. I will be dressed like Charlotte Flair, though, if we keep getting those. So nothing would make me happier to cash enough to where we have to wear our Flair outfit. So, yeah, really proud of MMA. Look for more profits coming this weekend. Plays are up at WagerTalk.com right now.
Yeah, and for those of you who haven't tuned in before, what Andy's alluding to there, we mentioned if the streak continues for Andy Lang, and we're talking towards the end of the year where Andy's still looking great across all sports and all profits, it's going to be Andy Lang and I dressing up as the Flair family. And I don't know if that's a positive. I don't know if that's a negative, Andy, but it's happening as long as Andy can keep it up. I know his clients want him to, and selfishly, I want him to as well. So, hey, huge thanks to Andy Lang as always. We're going to get to have Nick Borrman take some shots at Andy coming up here right after the break on Wager Talk Extra. But don't worry, we'll get our shots back at Nick following in the following week. So make sure you don't you don't miss out and stick with us right here on Wager Talk Extra. And we got Andy Lang's thoughts on this PGA event coming this weekend on yesterday's edition of Wager Talk Extra. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our great shows. You can go back and check out his thoughts. But the man who bested him with his thoughts was Nick Borrman, and Nick Borrman joining me right now. We had Rory McIlroy as our outright winner last weekend, and he might have not gotten it done. Fell apart a little bit on the back nine, Nick, but we had the head-to-head matchup between you and Andy Lang. He was one of his players that could trip you up, and if you had him in your DFS lineups, I don't know how tripped up you were. So you at least get the victory lap on that. While we didn't get the plus price home, maybe beating Andy Lang is a pretty nice consolation.
I take no joy in having that play over Andy. We had a lot of back and forth on our show, and he usually bettered me, but I will take no joy in it. But yeah, Rory, I gave up on him on Thursday, had a terrible day, and he just, the professional he is, grinded his way back, had the lead with 4 or 5 holes to go on Sunday, made a bogey, and ultimately couldn't close it. But when you're doing the outrights, all you want is that Sunday sweat, and I had it. So very close. Hopefully this week, Dan.
Yeah, he's Nick Borrman. He's now 1-0 head-to-head against Andy Lang. We'll keep that tally going here on Wager Talk Extra. Hop in the comments below. Who do you think's going to come out on top by the end of the golf season? All right, speaking of coming out on top, we always love kicking it off with some outright winners from Nick Borrman. We're going to get one of these home eventually, Nick. So who are we eyeing this week in the PGA?
Yeah, Dan, this week is a name most people have been backing recently, and that is Max Homa, known as the California specialist. He did show up again last week at Bay Hill, and he just continues to deliver week in and week out. He hasn't missed the cut since the Open Championship last summer. His worst finish in 8 official starts this year, Dan, is a tie for 39th, but otherwise he's been tied for 23rd or better in 7 other events, including 2 wins at the Fortinet and at the Farmers Insurance Open just last month. No real weaknesses in his game right now. He's been excellent in approach play. He ranks 5th in this field over the last 6 months in strokes gained approach, and he's number 1 over the last 3 months, gaining plus 1.34 per round. And approach play is going to be one of the most important aspects this week at the Players, because Pete Dye designs are very treacherous when you miss these greens. The past winners here have played at least 5 previous players before winning. That's happened 10 of the last 12 winners. Homa does not have that trend. He's only played here twice before, but he did miss the cut in that first start, 2021, but he finished tied for 13th last year. However, I'll just say it simply, there's no comparing Homa now to what he was even 2 seasons ago. He's a new guy. So I like Homa. 22-1 price on him to win this thing is a great value, and we're going to hope to cash this one this week, Dan.
I'm going to blindly back him every single time, Nick. And then when we finally get one home, you and I go into a steak dinner somewhere in Philly after that. All right. So where you really have shined, especially on this show and really your entire time handicapping golf, is finding these top 20 plus money plays. And I think we're just going back to the well. This is a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of special. Who are we looking this week for a top 20 finish, Nick?
Yeah, it's Keegan again. He cashed for us last week, Dan. He was plus 280. He's dropped a little bit in price this week. He's plus 210, but I love him. He's got, the Players is one place where course history probably is one of the least correlated events as far as that it matters, because you'll look at a lot of the guys in this field and you'll see miscuts throughout their whole profile. In fact, there's only 3 guys this week, Dan, that have not missed the cut in their last 5 trips here. And one of those is Keegan Bradley. The other 2 are JT and John Rahm. But otherwise, everybody else has missed cuts in their last 5 starts here. It's very volatile at the Players. But Keegan, like I said, he's been very steady. He's got finishes in the top 20 in 3 of his last 4, including a runner-up at the Farmers. He won the Zozo in the fall, finished tied for 5th at the Sanderson Farms in the fall. Just missed another top 20 as he finished tied for 21st at the CJ Cup. So he's consistently there or right there on the edge of the top 20 market. 11 starts at TPC Sawgrass. So he's got a lot of history here. His first 7, not so good. 3 miscuts, and no finish better than tied for 35th. But the last 4 starts, everything's been tied for 29th or better, with 3 of them in the top 20, including tied for 5th here last year. So current course trend is going in the right direction. Form is very, very good. Keegan Bradley, a little over 2-1 to be top 20 again this week. I think it's got good value, and I'm going to back it one more time.
A couple things lining up for Keegan Bradley, and I love seeing that plus next to his name. Top 20 finish for Keegan Bradley, that take back 210. So, Nick, of course, we're talking golf here, but the great special that we've been pushing not only here on WagerTalk Extra, but also on Stoppage Time, our soccer show here at WagerTalk TV. You can check that out through our channel, ST200. So people head on over to your page at sportsmemo.com. They can get $200 off a 90-day all-access pass for soccer, and you're really doing it all. MLS, one of your best, correct, Nick?
Yeah, it's been a good start to the season. Profitable both weekends, going for 5 straight winning MLS seasons. So looking forward to the rest of that year. 90 days, Dan, gets you through basically the Champions League final. So it'll be the rest of the European season and the first, obviously, 3 months of this MLS season. So a lot on the docket, a lot of soccer left in the cards, and definitely good value right now.
Always love having you on, Nick. We'll see if we can get one of these outright winners home, but make sure you check him out, sm.buzz/NB, and you can grab that soccer all access. Just use that code ST200. That's going to do it for our man, Nick Borrman. We're going to end it with his and all of ours favorite Irishman right after this here on WagerTalk Extra. It's the midweek treat we love giving you, ending the show with the Irishman, Kevin Dolan, and we got a little rugby and boxing action to get into. So, Kev, want to bring you in right away, and we'll start by talking a little rugby here, because this is a match that you have game Well, you'll have to clear it up for me, but this is something that you've alluded to every time we've talked rugby on this show, and it's the matchup between Ireland and Scotland. So we've had this one circled here on Wager Talk Extra. So what are we thinking as we set this one up, Kev?
Yeah, it was obviously rooting on the Scots 2 weeks ago, Dan. Not only because we gave out that +9.5 ticket on them, on the spread looked good, closed at 8.5, so we got a full point. It was 25-21 as well, with just a minute left before France went over the line. Started from that poor line out for Scotland, but wasn't just a side play on Scotland, as you mentioned. Obviously, would have been nice to set up, a big undefeated clash in this one between the old Celtic rivals at Murrayfield this weekend. But, regardless, should be a fascinating game nonetheless.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, Kev, I would be shocked if you came on here and said, hey, we're betting Scotland, because over the last few weeks with you talking rugby, I've learned that this Irish side might be the best team that you guys have in Ireland across all sports. So you have a way you want to attack this, and I love these kind of prop plays where you really ISO in on a handicap of the game and you find some nice plus money on a big favorite. So how are you going to be betting this game, and tell us why we have to bet Ireland alongside the Irishman?
Yeah, and you'd be absolutely correct, Dan. I am betting Ireland in this one. Look, anyone looking at Ireland 2 weeks ago might give Scotland a shot here. They looked a bit laboured against Italy, especially defensively. Their finishing looked poor as well. But, just like France a few weeks before, you can't look at the Italy result, and take much from that. Italy are generally seen as the whipping boys of this competition. There was even talk about booting them out of the competition last year, potentially South Africa taking their spot. Those rumours have went to bed, but nevertheless, we can take Ireland's performance from 2 weeks ago with a little bit of, a grain of salt, as they'll be far more dialed in for this one against a far more dangerous opponent in Scotland. Scotland showed 2 weeks ago, despite that loss in Paris, that, I've said this before in the show, they're a world-class outfit, no doubt. They had more total runs than the French in that game. They had more meters gained, but, as I've also said in this show, they're going up against the number one team in the world right now in Ireland, and I'm just not sure Scotland will have enough. It's just, it's all the little things Ireland do extremely well. If this was boxing, they'd be called fundamentals. They retain possession. They retain possession 100% from 100% of their rucks 2 weeks ago in Italy. They're only the second team to do that over the last 2 years. They have the fastest ruck speed in world rugby right now as well, 2.0 seconds on average. Unloading the ball. They're such a well-drilled outfit. So while I do expect this game to be close, I just believe that extra bit of quality that Ireland possess will get them across the line here, keep those Grand Slam aspirations alive, and a +130 over on DraftKings right now. I like the Ireland to win by 1 to 12 points in this one on Sunday against Scotland.
Yeah, and looking at those different point bands is a way to really ISO in on a way that you think a game is going to roll. And as Kevin said, where he found those, you can always make sure that you shop around, because the price difference, even on these point bands at different sports books, can definitely vary. So Kevin trying to find you the best price there. We always suggest you find the best price. All right, Kev, let's talk a little boxing here. Let's hop inside the ring. And you have a preview here on this Tszyu and Tony Harrison fight. Why don't you set up the fight, and then we'll ISO in on what you're going to be betting, Kev.
Yeah, fascinating fight over in Australia this weekend, Dan, in what's, a real crossroads fight for both men. Tszyu, who is on the way up on the sport, was originally supposed to fight Jermell Charlo for all the belts in this one before, Charlo got injured. But, Harrison stepped in, and what a replacement he is. Harrison's a fighter who's, maybe kind of viewed on the downslide in the sport, but, he's already proven himself multiple times at the top level, beat Jermell Charlo, beat Sergio Garcia in his last fight as well. So this is a real acid test for Tszyu on Sunday, Saturday night over with you guys in the US, in what's, it's for his first real test at 154 this weekend.
All right, well, Kev, do you think he's going to pass the test? And if he does, could even be finishing this one inside the distance? How's Kevin Dolan going to be betting at our boxing expert here at WagerTalk?
I was a little bit torn on this fight, Dan, because, Tony Harrison is the epitome of, an experienced old vet. He's actually only 32 years of age, but his level of experience in boxing is so vast. He'll obviously be looking to take advantage of all, Tszyu's deficiencies in the ring. And the Australian fighter has a few. His high guard is vulnerable against the high-level jab like Harrison employs. His ability to cut off the ring is questionable as well. So, there's no question Harrison definitely has the capability and tools to win this fight on points. Plus 450 looks like a very juicy price, even in Australia. But you would literally be watching this fight through your fingers for the entire 12 rounds, because while I do believe Harrison's the better technically of the two, there are certain things that Tszyu does extremely well that could prove problematic for Harrison in this one. Tszyu was slipping, countering Terrell Gauthier multiple times in his last fight. Really landing some heavy artillery on Gauthier as well. And with the way Harrison tends to linger in and around the pocket, that could spell disaster here. All it would take is one big overhand right from Tszyu, a left hook under the guard. And Harrison's, he could be sweeping every round, but suddenly he's laying on his back in the ring. So while it's certainly possible Harrison can win a decision in Australia this weekend, he's definitely got the tools, as we said. Tszyu's only got to be right once, and Harrison makes just enough mistakes for me. Leans a bit too far forward in the pocket when he jabs, hangs around that pocket as wary, just a split second too long. And I do believe as the fight goes on, Tszyu will catch him with more and more shots, land something big, and likely get him out of there late. So Tim Tszyu for me in this one, between round 7 to 12, a plus 290 over on FanDuel. I really like that price this weekend. Huge price, and what should be a great fight over in Australia.
Kevin plus money Dolan, 2 plus money plays for you here. Really going in on those different point bands and round bands on that one. So Kev, even though we talked boxing, even though we talked rugby, clients of yours know you well for what you do on the pitch and what you do in soccer. And we have a great code for folks. If you head on over to Kevin Dolan's page at wt.buzz/KD, use code ST200. That's going to get you 90-day soccer all access. Act quickly because this expires Friday. It's going to get you $200 off that all access ST200. And with that package, Kev, what kind of leagues do we have in session? Because you do pretty much all of them.
Yeah, as you said, Dan, it's a great deal. We're number 1 in German Bundesliga this year, number 1 in Italian Serie A as well. We got Champions League, Europa League, MLS. This code will take you through all the European domestic leagues. And I mean, I'm not sure about the other handicappers, but I do a lot of English League 1, English League 2, and two winners in the English lower leagues last night. They're obviously widely available at DraftKings, FanDuel, and so on as well. So, yeah, that offer expires on Friday, so it is a great time to jump on board.
ST200. Don't forget it. Huge thanks to Kevin Dolan. Always appreciate you coming on, man, whatever time it is where you're at and fighting through the internet issues. That's the Kevin Dolan difference. And that's going to wrap it for us here on a midweek edition of WagerTalk Extra. Big thanks to the guys. Make sure you check them out at WagerTalk.com. And in the case of Nick Borrman, check him out at SportsMemo.com. We will be back tomorrow. A little auto racing with Andy Lang, a little UFC with Kyle Anthony, and then Tokyo Brandon making his WagerTalk Extra debut to set you up for the World Baseball Classic. You're not going to want to miss that. Just make sure you're subscribed. Throw us a little like. Hop in the comments below. How are you going to be betting these events? And what are you going down the board trying to cash on just the same as those major sports? We'll see you tomorrow. I'm your host, Dan Alexander. Always a pleasure. And make sure you join us for next edition of WagerTalk Extra.